this particular video, I'm going to talk to you about what the difference between a Doctor of Education, PhD, and Doctorate of Business Administration is. So if you don't know me, I'm an Associate Professor of Innovation Strategy and Entrepreneurship. And I created this whole reciprocity project to give back as much as I possibly can. There were so many people that helped me out that I wanted to pay the favor forward and help you out. All right, so what is the key difference between a Doctorate of Education, a DBA, and a PhD? So I'm just going to go in and talk to you about some of the, the differences and sort of maybe suggest, what I would do if I was you in terms of making a decision in terms of which way you would go. All right, so if you kind of look at how all of these programs started, so these are professional programs. So Doctorate of Education, EDD and DBA, Doctorate of Business Administration, they tend to be professional programs. Now, there are some schools around the world that might be their academic program. So Harvard has a DBA program, and it's their academic program. But really, for a lot of programs around the world, they tend to be a lot more professional oriented. And the reason why that is the case is that a lot of schools recognize that there was a demand for professional education, right? So there is not everybody who wants to get a terminal degree. So that's what we call these sort of doctorate degrees, is a terminal degree. Not everybody wants to go and become an academic and actually do research. So that's the key thing, that you're being trained with a PhD, is that you're being trained to do research, whatever that looks like, right? So what is research? That is reading, writing, and arithmetic, and that's your job, is to sit there and just be an academic, right? So think of new ideas and write them down and sort of analyze the world and do all that kind of stuff. Now, there's a lot more to it. But that's the basic gist of it. So professional programs tend to be oriented towards people that want to go and do sort of management roles, or they just want to strictly teach or something along those lines. So that's the key thing to think about. And schools around the world, they're beginning to really realize that, that this is a viable alternative. There's lots of people that get an MBA, for example, or maybe they get an education degree, and then they realize they want to go back to school. And so there's this kind of slot of people that want to go and get a terminal degree, but there's not really a good sort of fit for them. And so schools recognize that, that this is a revenue source. Schools are businesses, institutions, universities are businesses, if you didn't know that. And they recognize that this is a revenue source, so they started opening it up and offering that particular opportunity. There's nothing wrong with that. It just means that there's an opportunity and people are willing to pay for that particular opportunity to do something with that, right? So that's all they're doing, is recognizing that there is a need in the marketplace, and the university is just opening it up to a lot of people. So in terms of the differences of what you'd expect with a EDD and a DBA and a PhD, the key thing is you want to look at outcomes and where they're going to go in terms of the career paths that you're going to go. So professional programs like the EDD and the DBA, they're going to go and do sort of more professional things, right? So the EDD, and I must sort of point out at this moment, I have several friends that did this degree, and it's a wonderful degree, and there's no way that I ever see that this is like not the right way to go, or the PhD is the right way to go, or anything like that. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that there's different sort of goals and outcomes that you get with these particular paths, right? And it's up to you to make that decision. It's up to you to sort of think through this, right? So the professional doctorate of education, what you're going to do is probably go into some sort of administrative role, and maybe it is probably not so much in an elementary school. Sometimes you do that at some really sophisticated elementary schools. My kids go to a charter school, and it's affiliated with the university that I work at. So there are a few people that have that particular degree, right? It just kind of makes sense for them to go into that because it's affiliated with a research school. Now, the DBA is going to be a lot more focused on you going. Oh, and the EDD, the doctorate of business or doctorate of education, you're going to end up mostly probably working in a university. That's going to be really common in terms of what you're doing. But the DBA, what you're likely going to be doing is, and I'm talking about a professional one again, what you're likely going to be doing is either teaching at a school, at a university, or going and, extending your getting a terminal degree so that you can go and apply this into the working world, right? So you're a consultant, for example, you got an MBA, and you're thinking of getting a doctorate to go back into consulting and use that knowledge somehow in the consulting world. So that's what you're looking at, right? So they tend not to go into more research careers, and that's typically what you would do with a PhD. And I'm not really carving this out. It's all really muddy. You have to realize that everything's really muddy, and some people will sort of be the exception and all that kind of stuff, right? So, and a lot of people will do a PhD and they realize that they don't sort of want to go in the research direction, and then they go into administrative roles, and that's totally normal. It's not. I'm not sort of framing anybody in any particular direction. I'm just sort of saying these are kind of what the norms are. So the people tend to be, so this is the second thing I want to point out, is that the people tend to be a little bit different in terms of these particular programs. And the reason is, with a PhD, it's an academic degree, so you're just going to go and work through the system, right? So you're going to be an undergrad, then a master's student, then a doctorate student. You're just kind of climbing up through that. So you can be a little bit younger. You're going to be really a lot more research focused in terms of what you want to go do. Maybe you're going to want to become a professor. Maybe you want to go work in a research institute. But with these professional programs, so EdD, for example, you tend to be, maybe you're an older student and you wanted to go back, and you're already well experienced and you just want to work in an administrative role in a university, and this is a nice way to do that, right? So you might end up taking a couple of courses along the way to build up and get your doctorate and terminal degree, so you can get a better role in a university. And lots of people do that. And the folks that I know, that's what they tended to do, and it was really good for them. It worked out in their favor in terms of the roles, in terms of advancing with what they're doing. So the other thing that you should consider, so this is the third thing to consider that I think is really important, and there's going to be vast differences between them, is the costs, right? So some of the DBA programs are going to be really expensive. And that's because, you just got to look at the clientele, right? So they're recruiting from people that maybe they are already a management consultant, they have pretty good salaries, and they're looking to leverage this. Or maybe that they are an executive someplace and they're looking to leverage your career. And so they're going to charge a little bit more for that. And they tend to be, there's a wide variety of them, but, they tend to be from, private institutions and things like that are looking for a revenue source. And lots of schools are actually going in that direction. So it's not kind of a crazy thing in any sort of way. The cost for the education programs tend to be a little less, and that's just because of the clientele in terms of the students that are going to be going to that. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong in any sort of way. I'm just sort of pointing that out. If you just kind of look at, who's going to where and stuff like that. And then, finally, the PhD program, often you'll end up getting paid if you're doing a PhD program. And the reason is you're getting a stipend. And then you go and do research for the university, and there's different, from the federal government or from the provincial or from the state governments, they're going to give money for people to do research and do knowledge discovery and search and things like that, right? So go in that route, and then you're going to get paid for that. So you're kind of an employee of a university. It's going to be a different sort of thing. It's going to be, it's just a completely different track in terms of, in terms of getting paid and what you're going to be doing in the long run. So that's one thing to consider, that there's going to be vast differences between them. And you have to really look at that, and highly, highly recommend for you to look at that. I'm not saying one way is better than the other. I'm just saying, just go and look at that. And, just be well aware that there is differences, and there's vast differences between all the different programs around, the country, around the world, in terms of where these things rank. And even within PhD programs, for example, some schools get really good stipends, other ones don't. Even DBA programs, same thing, wide variances. So just really look at that and just know what you're going to get, right? And you're making a trade-off in terms of what it's going to cost, and hopefully you're making the value that you're gaining from that is actually going to be worth the cost of what the particular program is, right? And if it doesn't work out in that way, then don't go to those programs, right? It's going to be really expensive for you in the long run. And you can watch a bunch of my other videos where I talk about some of this stuff. So in terms of the difference between the EDD, the Doctorate of Education, and a DBA in a Doctorate of Business, what you're basically looking at is that you're going to go into different trajectories in terms of what your careers are going to be, right? So the Doctorate of Education, you're probably going to be in higher education of some sort, right? So at a university. In a DBA, you have just a little bit more leeway in terms of where you can go and what you can do. It's not as, and this is all just kind of, an insider sort of view and stuff like that. I'm not, saying that this is the concrete deal and that you should take my word for it. But it just is not as sort of widely, not as many people have it. And so it is going to be sort of less recognized. And whenever you have that, then you end up having sort of legitimacy things that are going on, right? So you might come across that whenever you are doing a program like that there's going to be sort of legitimacy concerns. And that's just simply because there's less of that particular category, right? So there's a whole research in sociology that talks about this kind of stuff. But basically that's what we're looking at, is that there's just, fewer of them. So people just are not as well aware of them. And so that's one thing that you should consider in terms of what you're going to go into, particularly when you go into industry, right? So people are going to say, you have a doctorate, but then they can't really place you in terms of what you're doing. In terms of an MBA, people really know where you should be placed, right? Because it's really easy, because there's lots of other people that have MBAs or a bachelor's degree, for example. And that's just kind of uniformly, and that's a problem that happens with all terminal degrees. People just kind of don't really get what a terminal degree is in general and what you do and where it should be, what's valuable with them and stuff like that. So you just have to explain it. Just recognize that's going to happen. No matter what particular degree that you're going to go into or do. But, the Doctorate of Education, people get that a little bit more in terms of that area, because you're going into higher education and you do see a little bit more people with that. But, in general, it's a choice that you have to make. I'm not sort of pointing out in terms of what you should do, but you really have to sort of be true to yourself and what you want to do and where you want to go in the future and make that decision and just weigh the costs and make sure you really do that, because there's vast differences. Again, I'm going to stress that, vast differences in the costs of them. And it could cost you a lot of money to go into one and not have any particular career outcomes from that. So just be well aware of that going into it. All right, so that's all I wanted to point out in terms of the differences between the Doctorate of Education, PhD, and a Doctorate of Business Administration. If you didn't know what they were, this was actually, one of my followers asked me to help out with the differences and stuff. So I thought I'd let you know in terms of what it is. So if you like this video, give me a thumbs up. Do subscribe to the YouTube channel. I do appreciate it. Take care. Bye.